Hi, I'm Mubanga and I'm developing a game where you build a town on a tiny planet that can be played in VR. But this video won't be a devlog. It will be a full in-depth tutorial on how I made my hands from scratch in Unity and Blender. A lot of the Blender techniques I learned from Keelan John, and a lot of the VR techniques I learned from Justin P. Barnett. I will link to both those channels in the description down below. And for those of you wondering, I'm still making a good progress on my town building game. Here's a little sneak preview. But I just didn't have enough time to make a full, nice, comprehensive video about what I'm working on right now. So look out for that next month. But without further ado, let's get into it. Alright, so I have this Blender scene open right now. It's the default scene with the default cube. And down here there's a little thing that shows you what keys I'm pressing. So if I ever forget to shout out whatever I'm doing, you can find down here what it was. But I will try to make sure I say all the shortcuts that I do. So I press Tab to go into edit mode, as you can see over here. And then you can see that I've selected this cube. If it's not selected, you can press A to select everything. And we want to have a single point instead of a cube. So to do that, we press S to scale. As you can see, we can scale it right down. But we can also press 0 on the keyboard to make sure that it's one single point. With everything still selected, I'm going to press M and I say merge by distance. You will see down here, removed 7 vertices. So 7 of the 8 are gone right now, meaning that we have one single point left. I'm going to press 1 on my number pad to go into front view. And then I'm going to open my modifier panel over here with the wrench. And we're going to add 2 modifiers. The first one being the skin modifier. And the second one being the subdivision surface. So what the skin modifier does is it puts basically a skin around lines, and subdivision makes it a little bit more smooth, as you could see. So if I turn this one off, it's now a cube. If I add this, it makes it a little bit more smooth. And we can leave all this default right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select that point. You can always select like this. And then I'm going to press E for extrude. I'm going to press my middle mouse button so it snaps to the axis that I'm on, and I'm going to move it up a little bit. So that's the wrist of my hand. Then I'm going to add another point, and that will be basically the palm of my hand. I'm going to press Alt Z so I can see what I'm doing. I think I will move this down a little bit more. By pressing G, I can go into move mode. And then we're going to start modeling the hand. So we're going to take a look at my hands. I'm going to go for my right hand for me. I'm going to take a look at it, and I'm going to see like, okay, I have my thumb to the right. So let's put a thumb over here. So this is where my thumb starts. This is still part of the palm of my hand. And I'm going to add like probably 1 or 2 of these things to say, okay, that's my thumb. Then I'm going to add my index finger. That's my index finger basically. Then I'm going to add my middle finger, and I want to keep my middle finger in the center, just so I know that the middle finger is the center. No particular reason. And it's going to be a little bit of a misshapen hand, but bear with me. So the ring finger over here somewhere. And finally, we're going to add a pinky over here. Okay, so it kind of looks like a hand, but we're not really there yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select everything that's part of my fingers. I'm going to press Ctrl A, and that allows me to scale down how big this skin mesh modifier is. So that's starting to look a little bit better. And what I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to move stuff around until I find something that looks basically the way I want it to. Move all these points a little bit. So it's starting to get where I want it to be. You can always add like, you can select one line and then you can press Ctrl R to add another point in between. Like this maybe. Maybe we can scale this up and down. And basically my goal is to make sure that, all this messy stuff gets cleaned up a little bit. So move this over there, starting to look better. Okay, maybe I just select all of these, and then I'm gonna mess a little bit with the scaling of that. If you don't want a point in between these lines, you can actually click on that point, press X, and you can say dissolve vertices. So now it's gone, while maintaining the line. Yeah, and I find that scaling up this guy to the maximum always helps the most. Move all of these a little bit more in. I think we're almost there. So if you're actually doing this for a game that you're going to make, and you want to spend a lot of time on it, I would recommend spending like maybe an hour or something like that, getting this as close as possible as you can get. You can always also make sure that all the fingers are a little bit curved like this. Will make the animations look a little bit better, but for the purpose of this tutorial, I'm just going to show you quickly how to do it. Am I happy with this thing? I will say, oh yeah, that's it. And then maybe index finger can come in a little bit more, like so. It's a bit messy, this setup with the vision modifier and the skin mask modifier, but it's effective. And you don't need to be good at modeling, you just need to have a little bit of patience to make it look right. So I think we're there. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to tap out of edit mode. I'm going to press Alt Z again to show you what it looks like without the thing. And what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to select my modifiers. First the skin mask modifier, press Ctrl A to apply. You can also go in, I never do it like this, but there's a thing over here. This thing? Oh yeah, here, apply. And what that does is it applies the modifier. So right now, what you see is what you get. So if I tap back in, you can see all these points that we generated from those modifiers. Last thing I'm going to do for modeling this hand is your hand has like basically, it isn't this thick compared to the rest of your thing, and it's not really perfectly centered. If you take a look at your hand, you can see what I mean. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move these things a little bit. I'm going to press Alt Z again, because if you're in Alt Z mode, you can select stuff that you drew everything, right? So I can select all of this. If I weren't in X-ray mode, I only select the stuff that I can see. So I'm going to go in X-ray mode. I'm going to select all of this. I'm going to press G. I'm going to move this out a little bit. So this is going to be the outside of my hand, and this is going to be the inside of my hand. And then we're going to clean this up a little bit. So I'm going to select these 2 points. And then I can also go into proportional edit mode, which puts this circle around, which you can scale up and down by using your scroll wheel. And it allows you to move everything like a little bit more nicely. So something like this looks good. Again, if you are doing this for your game, I would recommend spending a lot more time on it. But for this tutorial, I'm going to say something like this is alright. Maybe go out of this mode again and move this one out a little bit more. Yeah, I'm going to say this is good. Maybe I can select all of this. Wait, go back to this. And maybe tilt it slightly inwards, just because that's the natural pose of your hand a little bit more. I would recommend bending all the fingers in your modeling, but it's going to take a lot of time, and I don't want to spend that time right now. So what I just did is I went into object mode, I right-clicked on the model, and I set shade smooth, which gives this smooth shading, which depending on what you want, you can also keep it flat. But I like it smooth, looks cool. And then finally, we're going to make a sleeve for your hand. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back into edit mode. We're going to select all of this, but we have to be in X-ray mode. I'm going to press Shift D to duplicate. That's what the thing that I just selected. right click to keep it at the same place. I'm going to press B to separate it. And as you can see over here, it became a separate thing. So now we have two objects and we can go back into object mode. We're going to rename these things. This one is going to be hand. And then we can call this one sleeve. So this is the whole complete hand. And this is the sleeve, you can see. And we're going to select the sleeve and we're going to add another modifier. And we're going to use solidify modifier. We're going to use the offset as going to be 0. And then the thickness can be whatever you think looks good. I think I will go with like 0.8. Nice thick sleeve, like a hoodie or something. We can say fill, you can keep it. No, this is fine. Maybe 6 or something. Yeah, that's okay. And then the last thing we can do to this model, just to make it look a little bit nicer in Blender, we can say, we pick like a skin color, something like this, go into render mode so we can see it. And I like my materials to be like a little bit on the rougher side, so it feels a little bit softer. 0.8. Then we can select this guy and duplicate it. We can say make it blue. We will do this again in Unity as well, but just so it looks nice in Blender. You want to render it or whatever. We could add another subdivision surface on this guy and on this guy to make it look a little bit nicer. Maybe move this subdivision surface up a little bit. So it's first subdivision and then the solidify. Whatever you prefer. So now we have this hand model, but it's static, right? It doesn't do anything. So to animate it, we need to give it like a rig. It's basically the bones that we're going to move, and then all the skin will move with it. So to add that, we go to armature, and we add a single bone. And then we go in to edit modes. While the armature is selected, we click on this little icon over here, object data properties. We go to viewport display, and we're going to say show in front so we can see it. This is the bone. It starts down here, and that's the endpoint. We're going to move this by pressing G, and then we're going to want it to be around wrist area, something over there. And what we then can do is the same thing that we just did. We're just going to move everything by extruding, pressing E. So we add a new bone by extruding from that point over here. Now we're going to take a look at the hands again. I'm going to go for all the different points your hand can bend. So my thumb has 2 points. Oh, wait. Press G to move it a little bit. E to, wait, my hand is on the wrong keys. E to extrude. It goes over here. And then the tippy point, maybe take this thing and press G to move it a little bit. And we're going to do the same thing for all the hands real quick. My index finger has 3, if I remember correctly. Yeah, like this. Maybe move it up a little bit. And again, you want to be pretty precise, or maybe the middle finger I want to keep centered, so I press the middle mouse button, so that everything is nice and straight. Again, you want to be pretty precise, and you want to take your time and do it right, because if you're playing a VR game, the hands are some of the most important things you're going to be looking at the whole time. But for this tutorial, I'm going to move pretty quickly, because otherwise it would take like 2 hours to do this tutorial. Yeah, you could bend them all in a little bit more. Maybe I will do just that for the top ones. I select all of these. I press the number 3 on the numpad to have the side view. I'm gonna rotate it a little bit like this. That's maybe too much. Rotate like just a tiny bit, just so it bend in a little bit more. And I'm kind of happy with this actually already. So yeah, that's my armature done. So we tap out of edit mode, we go to object mode, and we're going to select the sleeve, the hand, and the armature. And we're going to make sure the armature is the last thing we select. It will be a lighter color of orange. So if we press Ctrl P now, and we go for armature deform with automatic weights, the sleeve and the hand will attach to the armature. So let's do that. And as you can see, it attached down here. And what that means is that if we go over here and go into pose mode, and we select one of these things, and we press rotate, you can see I can rotate this bone and my hand moves with it. So yeah, now you could be animating all of these little bones individually, which would be fine if you want very precise control. I would actually recommend doing that. But if you don't really want super precise control over every single bone, and you just want general movement, there's a little trick that you could use. So to do that, you can select a bone that you want to be able to rotate, and then another bone that's attached to it that you want to rotate with it, which actually happens right now already, like so. But we want it to actually also bend more. I will show you in a second. So you select this one first, and then you keep Shift pressed, and you select the next one. Now you do Ctrl Shift C, and then you're going to say copy rotation. And then you can come over here into the bone constraints property panel. You can see that this guy showed up. It's on this guy, on this bone. It attached bone number 2, which is this bone. And you just need to make sure that you put this guy to local space and this guy to local space. And then when you go over here and you can say R, let's say XX, to rotate the line to the local axis, you can see that if I bend this one 90 degrees, this one bends 90 degrees with it. Which just makes animating a little bit easier, rather than doing it all by hand. But it might not be what you need for, depending on the animation that you're doing. So I'm going to do this for all of them. And for the fingers, I need to do it twice. I need to do it for this guy and that guy. And then I need to do it for this guy and that guy as well. So I will see you back in a second. Yeah, okay, so I did it for all of these twice. So I did it for this bone, and then this bone is now attached to this bone, and that bone is attached to that bone. If I select this bone, for example, and I press R, and I press X to rotate around the local X-axis, you can see that the whole finger nicely curls in. All right, now with the hand rigged, we're going to do a couple of poses that we want to see in Unity. So let's think about what poses we could use. I think we'll go with one pose that's just the default hand in a relaxed position. Probably finger guns, thumbs up, and probably a fist or something like that. You can do whatever you need for your game, but I think this will be a nice representation of what we can do right now. So we go down here, and we can select the dope sheet. And then next to this little icon where we just selected the dope sheet, we go to the action editor. Over here we press new, and we're going to call our new action relaxed or whatever. That's just the relaxed default pose that we have. And to do that, I'm going to just take this whole thing. I'm going to press I, and I'm going to say location, rotation, and scale. But that's not, this is not actually the relaxed pose that I was going for, so I think I will just select all of these guys. I'm going to press R, I'm going to press XX twice, move these in a little bit, probably the thumb as well. Just a little bit. And that looks like a good relaxed pose to me. A to select everything, I to add new keyframes, and all these keyframes are being added down here. As you can see right here, every bone has a keyframe, and every keyframe is like all the position, scale, rotation, all that stuff, which we can use in Unity in a second. So we're going to create another one. So we're going to make a copy of this one. We're going to call this finger. Yeah, let's call it just pointing or whatever. So we have pointing over here. And to do that, let's go back to this. Oh yeah, if you're in pose mode, let's discuss that for a second. If you're in pose mode and you moved stuff, rotated stuff, built stuff, or whatever, and you want to reset it, you can just press select everything. You can press Alt, G, R, and S to reset. So G for our movement, R for rotation, and S for scale, and it resets it to like the default position. So my finger guns I want to keep like that. That's going to be straight. My index finger, and then all of these can curl in a little bit. This isn't looking too pretty. So I see. So press R, XX to keep it on the local axis. I was rotating them on like the global axis. Rotate them a little bit in like this. So that's a nice pointing finger. Okay, so that's our pointing thing done. So let's select everything. I'm going to press A to select everything, I to the keyframes, and we're going to put a keyframe for everything. And then let's make a copy of this, call it fist. And then R, XX, make a nice fist. This guy can be, the thumb can also come in a little bit more in the fist, like that. Looks pretty good. So we select everything and keep going. And then what was the last thing I said? Oh yeah, we can do thumbs up. So let's do. So while I was recording the next part where I'm implementing all of this stuff in Unity, I realized we don't really need the thumbs up because we can get it from our pointing. So we can just take this this position of the thumb and apply it to our fist so that it sticks out when we make a fist. So instead I chose to create a pinching pose like so. And a cool way you could actually animate these hands as well, I just wanted to mention is if you select this bone, for example, and you press R and R again, you go into a trackball rotate mode, and you see it moves a little bit more like a snake or whatever. So I use that to create this pinching motion. Don't forget to select everything, press I to attach it to your keyframe, so it's in your new keyframe. And that's it. We'll move on to the Unity part right now. So right now I'm in the new project screen in the Unity Hub. You can use any version that's newer than this. It doesn't really matter. And we're going to use a VR template. We're going to call this, I don't know, and tutorial or something like that. And we're going to create a project, and I'll see you over there. All right, so we have our VR template open right now. We see the screen. We can close this out right now. This is all tutorial stuff, but I will take you through this so you don't need to do this right now. Close this tab. We don't need this anymore. I have my Oculus Quest connected to my PC in link mode. And right now I'm going to go to Edit, Project Settings, and I'm going to set up my build environment for VR. Because right now, if I were to press play, nothing would happen. So we're going to select OpenXR, which is basically a package that will allow any VR headset to work, not just Oculus, not just Vive. It's like a generic one that works for all of them. So most of the time you will be developing for OpenXR. It's unless you're doing some very specific Oculus stuff. It will want to restart, so we're going to do that right now, and I'll see you in a bit. So I'm back. We restarted. I can go to OpenXR down here, and I'm going to select the Oculus Touch Controller profile. You should add all the controllers you want to support, but right now I'm only going to worry about Oculus Touch because that's what I have, and that's what I'm going to be using for this tutorial. Close out this window, and if you don't have that option down there, actually, in your project settings, the XR plugin management, we can go to Window, Package Manager, and we're going to wait for these packages to load. We're going to go to the Unity registry, and then down here, this should automatically be installed in this template. If it's not, you can install it right here and do the steps I just did. But we're also going to need one little script from the XR Interaction Toolkit, so we might install that as well while we're here. You could do this with the whole XR rig that comes with the Interaction Toolkit with all the UI stuff and everything built in. But for now, this one that comes with the default tutorial is fine. Yeah, we'll take you quickly through what this XR rig is. It isn't really that interesting. It has a camera offset with a camera attached to it. Yeah, this thing updates on the position of your head-mounted display. And now you have two trackpose drivers on your controller, which are just your generic XR controllers, and they track your transforms of your device. They don't do any button inputs or anything, but we're gonna do that manually anyway, so we don't worry about that right now. So I'm gonna quickly make sure that everything is set up right, and I'll be right back with you when I have my headset on. All right, so we're in play mode right now, and we can see that we can see our controllers. We can move them and move them a little bit too close to our face. We can see they disappear. So that's the first thing we're going to fix right now. To fix those camera clipping planes, we can come in here to our main camera, and we're going to put our near clipping plane to something small like 0.01. And we don't really need to be that far at the moment, so we can go for like 100. Then we can come in here and remove our controllers, because we're going to add our own models. So we go to our Blender file. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to do file save as, and I'm going to save it in the assets folder of my Unity project, and it can just be a Blender file. That's fine. I'm going to save as. If I go back to Unity right now, I can see it show up over here in a second. And then we can do some import settings. First thing we're going to do is we're going to say, create an avatar from this model in the rig tab. And we're going to choose our bone. That's the first bone that we created. And we're going to hit apply, and we'll create that avatar that we're going to use to animate. And then in animations, we're going to make sure that all our different poses are still there. And that seems to be fine. We can keep the materials that we made in Blender. Those are fine. For the tutorial, I would usually just go and create a universal render pipeline material. Looks a little bit better, but for the sake of this tutorial, this is fine. So we can drag our model in over here, and you can see we have our light and camera still there. So to remove those, we can come down here to prefab and say unpack completely and delete those. Then we can move the hand model into my right controller. Then we can go back into play mode, and we'll see what we have right now. So I'm in here in play mode, and you can see I have this giant hand that isn't really oriented the way I want to, but it is working and it is attached to my controller, so that's good. So let's fix that orientation. So I'm just going to guess right now. I think it should be something like 0.2. That's the scale I'm going for. I could just take a look right now. Seems to be about right. My rotation, I think it will be something like this. So take a look. That might actually be a little bit too far, so I will go for 80. Yeah, that seems about right for me. And then finally we need to fix our offset, but that's hard to see on a 2D screen, so I'm going to go in. Yeah, I can see that it's rotating around my wrist, but that point is in the middle of my hand. So I'm going to move it back a little bit. I think it's going to be positive in the y-axis, if I'm correctly. Yeah, that's perfect. So if I were to go out of play mode right now, I would lose all these values. They will be back to whatever it was when I started play mode. So to save those, I can say copy component over here, move out of play mode, and it's reset. and then I can go in, paste component values, and I have all my values back. So that's a cool little trick to save your component values if you're ever in play mode and want to save them. So we have our hand and it's moving, but it is still static. So to add some animation to that hand, we're going to come in here and we're going to create an animator controller. Let's call it hand animator. You can open it up, you can see it over here. And then we can attach it to our hand model. It has an animator over here and we can add a controller over there. Then we can come in here, we can say create a state from new blend tree. And we can come in here in the parameters and we're going to attach a grip parameter and another float. And we're going to call it a trigger. And those will be just the values between 0 and 1 of pressing the grip and pressing the trigger. So then we can come into our blend tree and we're going to set it to 2D simple directional. And we're going to choose grip for the x-axis and trigger for the y-axis. And we can add 4 motion fields to it for all 4 of the poses. I'm going to go with my relaxed first, then my fist, then I'm going to have pinch, and then I'm going to have pointing. And then let's think about what this means, right? So we have our grip trigger on the x-axis and our trigger on the y-axis between 0 and 1. So in a relaxed pose, both my grip and trigger are not pressed, so they will both be 0. In a fist pose, both triggers are pressed, so they can be both 1. When I'm pinching, I'm only pressing my trigger, so my grip can be 0 and my trigger can be 1. And when I'm pointing, it's the opposite way, right? So it's just my grip pressing and my index finger is doing nothing. So that can be 1 and that can be 0. And then if I go over here, you can see it made this little square of points. All of these are my poses. And I can drag this red little dot around and I can see it down here. Make this a little bit bigger. You can see it smoothly blends between whatever, depending on if I'm using my grip or I'm using my trigger. So that's pretty cool, but now we need to attach it as well to our controller, right? We need a little bit of logic to get the inputs and attach it to this animator. So to do that, we're going to make a new script. I'm going to call it hand controller, create a net, and we're going to open this up in Visual Studio. And we're going to be using the new Unity input system. So we're not going to be using system at all. I'm not going to be using start. Don't need comments. We can do using Unity engine.input system, which is the new input system. And then we're going to use an inputs action reference. We're going to call this one grip input, I think. No, yeah, grip input is fine. And then the next one we can call grip trigger inputs, like so. We're going to say, yeah, we're probably going to need to make these public so we can access them in the inspector. And we can have a private animator called animator, which we will take on awake. So we go void awake, and we can say animator is get component animator, like this. And then over here we can say a new float value, which we will get from the grip input on our update. It's going to be grip input dot action dot read value as a float. And we're going to do the same for trigger. So we can say trigger inputs dot action read value as a float. We probably should add like a null check over here as well. So if we don't have an animator, we probably want to go out of here because otherwise we're going to have issues. So if we don't have an animator, we're just going to return this function as nothing. And then it's safe to say over here animator dot set float, and we're going to say grip. So we can duplicate this, call this trigger, and say trigger over here. These two values are the same values that we just set in our animator. That's the grip and the trigger over here. So then we just need to create like an input action thing called VR input. Create a new action map, call it right hand, and then we're gonna say grip, and then this is going to be specific for Oculus, but I'll link in the description the total list for all the different devices, what values they use over here. This needs to be a value of access, and then we can come in here on the right hand. I'm going to say grip, but that one is specific for the Oculus Quest. Different controllers gonna use different of these values. So there's probably like a grip button or whatever that's used by Valve and other things. Over here we're gonna do trigger, and we can come in here and say trigger, and we're gonna put this on autosave because I always forget to save this. So for those generic inputs to work, we're going to need to add another little script to our scene, and it's going to be the input action manager, action assets, and we're going to create a new one in this array, and we put our action asset in there. I think this guy just initializes basically your inputs, so Unity knows to listen for them. Then we can come back to our hand model and go to our hand controller, and if we click over here, we're going to see we have our grip and our trigger inputs that we just created. And then we can go back into VR and see if everything works. Okay, so now I'm in play mode, and I can see that if I press my grip button, my 3 fingers close. If I press my trigger, I go into the pinch animation, I have the relaxed animation and the fist animation. So all of my 4 animation I can blend between. But what I want to have happen as well is I want to be able to do a thumbs up, and I want to have my finger pointing. So the cool thing about these Quest controllers is that they have touch sensitivity on the buttons, right? So they know if you're touching one of these buttons, and we can use that to do a little bit more animations. So what I want to happen is if you're pressing this trigger, I want your index finger to curl in a little bit, and if you're not pressing it, it should be pointing out. And then for your thumb, it's the same thing, right? So your thumb is going to be in if you have a fist, for example, but if you're not pressing one of these buttons on the black part, your thumb is going to be out. So to do that, we're going to create a new layer in our animator. I'm going to call it index. And we're going to create another layer called thumb. And these will be the ones that control what our index and thumb are doing. But in order for these layers to know which bones they affect, we need to create a new mask, avatar mask over here, called index. And then you can come in here, select your avatar, import the skeleton, toggle everything to be off. And then you can see over here we have all our bones. So what would have been a good idea if I named all of these bones in Blender before, but I can also just see over here what's named. So this one is called bone 001, that's my thumb, and bone 004 is the beginning of my index finger. Come back to Unity. I'm on my index finger, so everything that's attached to 004 is part of my index finger. And this is now a mask only selecting those bones. I can create another one for my thumb as well, so go avatar mask, thumb. Import the model, toggle everything to be off, select my bones attached to bone 1, and that's now my thumb. I can come in here and attach this index over here, and this thumb over there, and to make sure that they override with weight 1. So that's how much they override. We want it to be full. Now over here we can create a new state. We're going to do an empty state, and this is just like whatever, you know. So if it's on this state, it will just do the same as the base layer. But we want to be able to override that, so we create another empty state, and we're going to call this index out. So I can make a transition from our empty state to our new state, for our index out state, and back. And then we can disable these exit times. And then for the values, so we create a couple of parameters as well for this. I'll call this index, a float, and then another float, we'll call it thumb. So basically what we want to happen is, if you're not touching this thing, your index finger should be pointing out. And if you are touching it, your index finger should be doing whatever it is doing on the base layer. So to set that up, we can come in here, we're going to add a condition. We're going to say the condition is going to be index, it's less than 1. So if I'm not touching it, we're going to go to the animation, and that's going to be just a pointing one. And we go back when you are touching it. So the index is greater than 0. That's fine. And then for the thumb, we can do the exact same thing, create a new empty state. Create another empty state, call it thumb out. I'm going to say pointing. It didn't save my thing. I forgot to press enter. Thumb out. I'm going to set it to pointing. Move, make a transition over there. Make a transition over there. Back. Set the exit time to be 0. Say thumb is less than 1. And thumb is greater than 0. I renamed the wrong thing, so this should be state. This is none. This should be thumb out, and this one should be pointing. Otherwise, it's going to do the exact opposite of what we want to happen. Yeah, that's awesome. So now we need to add some extra code to our little script. So we go to our hand model, open it up. We need to have 2 more inputs. This is going to be index input. This is going to be thumb input. We can copy this, called index input. And we're going to call it thumb input. These as well. Index input on index. And we have thumb input. Oh yeah, no, this is not input. This is just this value. So it's just index. I don't really like that it's index. I often use it for something else, like an actual index, as in a number. So I'm just going to call this touch real quick. Just better practice. Then we just needed to set up the inputs as well. So we go over here, can copy this, Control D to duplicate, call this index touch. And this is going to be one of those situations that's Oculus specific again. So you might have to check what your controller is, but for Oculus, it's going to be trigger touched. Make sure it has the ED at the end. There's also a trigger touch somewhere, and that one wouldn't work for Oculus. So we're gonna go for trigger touch, and then for thumb touch, there's gonna be a lot of values that you can add, right? Because we have like the primary button, secondary button, the stick touch. We have this little touchpad over here, and I even believe this menu button knows if you're touching or not. So you can add all of those. I'm just gonna go with our primary touch and maybe our secondary touch because it's easy, it's right there. And I made the mistake of picking touch instead of touched, which wouldn't work. So we're gonna go for primary touched, that one, and secondary touched. So this is it's a little bit confusing, but I will have the complete list, link to the complete list down in the description of what values you need for what device. All right, then we can come back to our hand model. Gonna pick the right input, so gonna say index touch and thumb touch, and we're gonna see what we have. So I'm in play mode again, and as you can see, if all the stuff still works, but my thumb is not going in if I have my fist animation. Although if I add my thumb to my primary button, you can see it moves in. So that's exactly what we wanted, and that's awesome. You can also see that if I have my hand open like this, my index finger is stretched. If I put my index finger on the trigger, you can see it moves in a little bit. You could do a different setup as well, where actually if your thumb touches, it comes in, so you can do your finger guns stuff. So yeah, that's great. We have the whole hand working right now. You can have some different animations or whatever you need for your game, different states. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy this model, move it over here, rename it. And this is going to be our left hand. So my left hand is going to be mirrored around the Z-axis. And for the input, we're going to go over here. You can just copy this whole thing over, call it left hand. I cannot type today for some reason. And then all these values need to be changed over to left hand. Luckily, this new input system is pretty handy. I can just go to over here and pick one of them on my left hand. And then if I come over here, I can just go over here, and if you do trigger, you can see they remember what my last controller was that I picked. So it keeps that, and I can easily just go over here and change all these over to be left-handed. So I go trigger touched. And then over here we have primary touched and secondary touched. And then the final thing we need to do is we need to make sure that we move all these hand controller inputs to the right input. So you're going to say left hand grip, left hand trigger, left hand index touch, and left hand thumb touch. And then we can go into play mode one last time. And yeah, awesome. We have 2 working hands set up with a bunch of different poses. You can do any other pose that you like. Think about what different poses and different combination of buttons make sense for you. Yeah, and I hope you can figure it out on your own using blend trees and different masks, so you can get any pose that you want for your game. And that's it. Alright, so there you have it. If you made it to the end of the video, well done. It was a pretty long one. If you learned something today and enjoyed this video, please leave a like. And if there's any other topic that you've seen in one of my other devlog videos that you want a full in-depth tutorial about, please leave a comment. If there are enough comments, I might do another tutorial like this. For now, please subscribe and watch out for the next video where I'm going to make characters for my town building game. See you next time. Bye!